Everybody, it's Steph with Killer Sites and Other Sites. So why did I stop or shut down my web development studio? Now, this is going back a long time. It's going back to the 90s. Late 90s, early 2000s, actually. Excuse me. Early 2000s, late 90s. So I had a web development studio, and we're doing a lot of web apps and so on. And it was a small team, at its biggest, maybe 6 or 7 people, I believe, working under me. And after a few years of doing this, I decided to shut it down as far as having people work for me in web development to sell, in terms of building other people's systems. And the number one reason I shut it down, well, there's two reasons. Number one, when you become a manager of people, when you become successful as a web developer, as an independent, which it will happen, if you keep developing your skills, you keep improving on what you do, what will happen is you'll find is you get more and more and more clients, and then all of a sudden you're going to have more work than you can handle. So there's a couple ways to deal with that. Number one, you could start implementing more frameworks, like bring in jQuery and really know how to use it properly. You have an MVC framework, like within the PHP world. That would be, today I think the best choice would probably be Laravel, or if you're in the Ruby camp, you would use Rails, and you become really good with these frameworks and other frameworks, of course, Bootstrap, yada, yada, yada. And then you take these and then you can put together projects much more quickly. Another way you can handle this is you could start bringing in help. You could start hiring other developers whose skill sets complement yours. So if you're strong with coding, then you might want to bring in a front-end guy. Or if you're more of a front-end guy, you want to hire in maybe some guys who do the back-end, the server-side coding, the PHP, the Ruby, the Java, whatever. Anyway, so you have those two options. Now, what happens, though, if you go the second option where you hire in people, and ultimately if you become really successful, this you will have to do. What you're going to see is, you're going to become detached from the process of writing code, for instance, because you just won't have time. You're going to be too busy dealing with clients, too busy managing the team and managing the projects from afar. You'll be losing touch with the code. And that was one of the big reasons why I shut it down, because I was becoming too detached from the code, and I didn't want to be at that point in time. I didn't want to lose touch with the code. I really loved to code back in those days, that's for sure. Not that I don't like it now, but back then it was I was totally obsessed with code and building projects. I was one of those guys on Friday nights. My friends would go out, drinking and playing pool. And I'd be, no, I'm working on a dating app here. It's like I'd have so much fun building apps. Anyway, so that's so if you bring in the talent, you bring in people working for you, you're going to get detached from code, from the process, and it becomes, you have a whole new role, you have a whole new job. So keep that in mind. You may love that, you may not like that, but that's the reality of the situation. Another thing that happens, which you'll discover, is that it takes many people working for you to equal the salary you would make or the money you would make as an independent contractor working on your own. My calculations back in the day, it takes about 10. It takes about 10 people working for you full time before you can earn enough from their work to be able to make the same money that you would be making if you worked on your own. Keep that in mind as well. So there will be this lag period between when you start hiring a few people, and you're going to see the money that you put in your pocket is going to drop, because you got all these other costs associated with having several people working for you. Management cost and accounting costs, and there's just this general overhead. I find when you have more than 3 people on a project, the productivity of the individual people rather, working on the project drops quite a bit. Not that they're not doing good work, it's just that you got this overhead of coordinating the activities of 4 or more people. So keep that in mind. I find the optimum group size for working on projects is about 3 people working on a particular project. I'm not jumping around. Anyway, so what will happen is you're going to need about 10 people working for you full time before you make the same money as you would working as your own independent. And you have to have 10 people working for you to make the same money as you would if you were working on your own. But again, and with the frameworks, where you start using frameworks to maximize your productivity, which I did a lot of that. Now you can make really good money that way when you get into that. The problem with that, it's limited. There's always so much you can do. So keep that in mind. So I decided to stop. The original Studio Web, by the way, was a web development firm, Studio Web, and I registered that domain in 1998. Because I used to, it was called, believe it or not, I Designed before in the mid 90s. And then I said, oh, I'll call it Studio Web. Should have kept the I Designed domain, right? You know. Anyway, so that's it. So I wanted to be more into code again. So I shut that down. And also I was at that period, I was at that point where it was like 5 or 6 guys, maybe 5 or 6 guys, maybe 7 at some points working for me. I forget the exact number. And I was still making less than I would have made when I was just coding on my own. So that's just something to consider if you're in the freelance web development business right now and you're thinking about bringing in staff. Another thing you can do is maybe partner with other guys where you have them, you outsource to people you know and trust parts of the project. So you still keep your hand dirty in code if you like to code or you like to design and so forth, but you outsource little bits that you don't want to do necessarily. This is a compromise, if you will. And I can tell you, if you do that right, you can make very good money, much more than you'd think. At my peak in the 90s, I was billing out about 200 the hour. That's what I was making for my time. I have spoken to people. I thought I was doing pretty good. I know people who were doing 300 the hour. Now, it's not what they said to the client, I'm charging you 300 the hour, but they say, okay, my rate's 75. And, but because of they had their own frameworks, that's what I did. I had my own framework. And then, this is when I was in my Java days. I had my own Java-based framework. It was a Pojo-based MVC system that I had put together. This is back in the day when MVC frameworks, they were out there, but I didn't like what was out there, so I just wrote my own. I wouldn't do that today. Today, if I was in PHP, I would use Laravel, or if I was in Ruby, I would use Rails, for instance. Or today in JavaScript, you might want to look at Node.js. That'd be a good choice, I think. Anyway, by using your framework, you could be very, very productive. And so you say, yeah, I'll do this job and I'll charge you $5,000, and you calculate your hours, and you say, yeah, I'm charging you $75 the hour, and you're actually making 200. Is that ripping off? No, because they're going to compare your bid with other people's bids. As long as you deliver the work and it's good, and you're competitive with everybody else, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter how much time you take. In that time you've invested in your framework or learning this framework or putting together a workflow that's highly efficient, that's worth money. That's just like the time an author puts in their book and they make residuals off that book. There's nothing wrong with that. So if you invest in your skill sets, you invest in your own framework or some other framework. You should use other frameworks, by the way. I'm not somebody, these days, you don't need to build your own framework, just to be clear. When you invest your time and effort into that, there's residuals from that, your heightened productivity. And anyway, that's pretty much it.